Hello, it's time for another Gita video. Hopefully this time my cat won't sit on the keyboard and cut off the ending. But I guess cutting off the end bit is better than cutting off the beginning. Or worse, the middle. So we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita, and now we're starting chapter 5, the Yoga of Awareness and Action. And today we're looking at verses 1 to 3. So, Arjuna said, Krishna, first, you're giving praise to the renunciation of activities. Then, you give praise to yoga. Please tell me definitively which one is more beneficial. The Blessed One said, renunciation of work, or the work of yoga, both of them lead to the way of openness. But of the two, the work of yoga is better than the renunciation of all work. He should be understood always as the renouncer, who neither rejects nor desires. Free of duality, great warrior, he is always happily liberated from bondage. So, as in the previous chapters, this chapter starts with Arjuna experiencing some doubt as to what he's hearing. And in this one, Arjuna is confused because he says that Krishna first talked to him about renouncing activities and then about being active in yoga. So he's saying, well, aren't you sending a mixed message there, basically? He's suggesting that if on the one hand you're saying that being engaged in activity is the source of suffering, that being trying to achieve things from your own initiative, and then on the other hand you're saying engage in yoga, isn't that sort of the same? And this is a question that occasionally comes up, right? If you understand spiritual work just as the renunciation of all desires, then you could say, well, but hold on, the desire to become enlightened or to become spiritual or something like that is itself a great desire. And well, that's true, it is a big desire. So how could that be right? And then sometimes you have people jumping to things like saying, well, then I just don't have to do anything, right? And it becomes a bit of an escape. And remember, Arjuna is still here vestigially trying to argue for his own escape. He's arguing, trying to figure out a way to justify abandoning his duty, abandoning his purpose and his higher calling, his true will, and giving up this terrible battle that he would have to fight and rushing off to live life as a hermit in the forest. And Krishna, what he says is that the renunciation of work and the renunciation of yoga can both lead to a way of openness, but the work of yoga is better than the renunciation of all work. And to understand this, you have to get that it's not really about rejecting all desire. You can't approach the spiritual work as saying, well, if I just don't want anything, if I don't need for anything, if I just if I just don't do so, if I push away all of the things I want, and the kind of the shallow way of understanding this is that way that Arjuna seems to want to do, which is to give up all his worldly possessions and go live in a loincloth in the forest somewhere and become kind of a hermit, right? That's the most fundamental perception, which not a lot of people do today because that's hard work too, right? But a lot of people do things like they kind of reject the idea of living in the world of they try to explain that their personal inability to keep a job or to have a relationship or things like that is really just that they're so above it all, right? That they're so spiritually sophisticated that they they don't really care about those petty things of the material world. They've rejected the material world, right? And so they, they give up meat or they give up television or something like that, and then they feel like they're being spiritual. Um, but that's a fundamental misunderstanding. What you have to understand is that desire and repulsion are really the same thing. If you're trying to push something away, you're not, you're pushing something away because you actually desire something else, right? Or you're pushing something away because you're trying to reject actual feelings of desire you have within yourself, right? So if it's something you didn't really want in the first place, then what you're really doing is not pushing something away. You're pursuing a different desire, right? If you're not very interested in television, then saying, I've given up television is not really a big deal, right? It's like if you say you're going to boycott Justin Bieber albums and you never liked Justin Bieber, right? Right, then it's not really a boycott, is it? Because you're not actually giving up something that there was any chance of you purchasing, right? Well, it's the same thing here. If the things you're rejecting are things that you already don't like, then it's not some kind of a great act of piety on your part, right? It's not a great act of consciousness on your part. It reminds you of the kind of behavior or perception that you can have of certain religiously fundamentalist people, right? That, they think God happens to agree with them about all the things they hate, right? They don't really like drinking or smoking or sex or gays or things like that. And lo and behold, God doesn't either, right? And they've rejected those things, right? They've given up rock music, which was always too loud for them in the first place. So that's not really a rejection. Instead, what they're doing is clinging to this desire for self-righteousness, for a sense of, purity, for the idea of being superior to others. So they're actually engaging in desire as they're pretending to reject something they didn't want, right? And then on the other hand, you have the kind of rejection of people who will, in seeking some kind of a higher desire, give up something that they genuinely feel an attraction to, but because they think that they're getting something bigger out of it, right? So, somebody who actually really likes bacon says that they're going to become a vegetarian and they're rejecting, the eating of meat. And they might really actually genuinely like bacon, but they like the sense of being righteous, the sense of being spiritual, the sense of, having something to be smug about more than they like bacon. So they're able to reject the one thing in order to connect to that other thing, to that sense of being good people, to that sense of, having accomplished something or whatever it is that they're getting out of doing that rejection, right? So if you're just simply trying to renounce the external, you're not actually abandoning desires, right? You're just putting a lid on certain desires and possibly promoting others. So what Krishna says after that, he says that somebody who neither rejects nor desires should always be understood as the great renouncer, right? If you're free from duality, then you get liberated from bondage. So the work of yoga that Krishna is talking about here is not the work of giving up things. It's the work of rising above things, right? It's the work of being able to get to the point where you're not driven by attraction and repulsion, but where you've achieved a state of consciousness where these things don't these things don't govern you in any particular way. So it's not about what you're doing on the outside. The work of yoga is about how you're growing, how you're expanding yourself on the inside until those things become petty. Those outside things become petty, and you're not controlled by them. That is how you are liberated from the bondage of attraction and repulsion. It's not by pushing away what you're attracted to, right? Or pretending to be repulsed at certain things in order to get others. So this is the fundamental of this chapter. This is kind of the starting point from which the rest of this chapter, which is about the yoga of awareness in action, that is being enacted inside action, but in a way that you bring consciousness to the actions that you do. That's everything for today. If you like this video, be sure to check out the rest of the Bhagavad Gita playlist and check out the channel as a whole. Please subscribe and make sure you get notifications for the kind of irregular times I post videos. And if you're interested in working in a course of spiritual cultivation, of spiritual discipline, then check out especially the videos of the EFA Society, and if that appeals to you, get in touch with me and consider applying. That's all for today. Thank you very much.